let's try to stick to that. I don't know if you all need to eat lunch, and so maybe some of you do. Anyway, we'll stick to that. So this young lady who was came in through the room there. She had a nice question that we could, I think would be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, I'm not a part of the movement. I'm just there to study, and now I kind of thought this was interesting too. So I added my book in my bag, and my question is that I see the elder generation. I see my mother and people older than her trying to look young, trying to act young, and in some way I'm not thinking as them, as people who are setting an example for me, because all they want to do, according to commercials and stuff like that, is to buy cream so they can look like I do. And they want to have hobbies which is the same as I have. They want to do a marathon if they were able to. And somehow I don't see the society being proud of having these older people, having these wrinkled, older, wise-looking, nice people. And I feel a little troubled seeing those people as an example for elderness. So I don't think it's the young people who's necessarily the problem, who's not respecting the elder. I think the elder is not putting themselves in a position where I'm going to be able to respect them as elder people.
So actually your question brings up the point, is that modern society destroys the place of everyone. Practically nobody has a proper place in modern society. This began maybe a little over 100 years ago with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. In my book, did anybody bring the copies of my book?
Right.
Yeah,
In my book, I trace out how how the people were pushed off the land into the city. And what happens then is that all of those established relationships, they become completely upset. You go into the city, you don't have those relationships anymore, and people don't know how to relate to each other, how to function. It's difficult to again establish those relationships. So that's actually transferred to a modern society. So there's one French sociologist, what's his name? Who wrote about anomie. Anybody know? Maybe the name will come to me in a minute. Anyway, he's considered the father of sociology by some. He observed this situation and he wrote about it, and he saw what happens is when people don't have these proper relationships, they become a little crazy. They engage in antisocial behavior. There's increased suicide. That was one of his books, Suicide. Increased suicide, increased crime, increased or deviant sexual behavior, because people no longer feel themselves to actually have a place. And then you see, I'm observing young men now, at least in our society, right, the Hare Krishna society. But not just there, even across the board. I see that the young men, they have a very difficult time finding their place in society. It used to be back in the 1950s, boys and girls, they'd graduate from high school, their parents, their father would give a job to the boy, they'd get married and start their family. When I came of age, at the end of the 60s, it was go to college, then get married, then start your family. And that was what, early 20s, something like that. And now we see that the boys and girls aren't getting married, if they do get married at all, until the late 20s. The average age, I think, I read just the other day, the average American girl now is getting married at 26 and a half or 27 years of age. And for the boys, it's 29 or 30.
In Denmark, it's even older.
It is.
Yeah, in 30 when you get in Copenhagen, 30 when you get your first child now. 30 years. That's normal.
30 when you begin your first child.
Yeah, when you begin. That's in Brazil, when I'm grown, people are looking like this. What?
That means you're going to be having kids around when you're 70 and 75. Good luck with that. So, that's a problem. We have to find our place in modern society, and it's very difficult to do. Because we don't have the relationships. Finding a work that you love, forget that, you know. How many of you have work that you like to do? You're an unusual group, okay.
Everybody.
Well,
And you are out of work.
in India, in Russia, in America, when I ask that question, generally we only get about 30% of the hands, maximum. 80% of the people don't like what they do. So you don't have a place in terms of your proper occupation, you don't have a place in terms of proper relationships, and well, maybe you still have time to have a place to take care of the body. In America, however, we have millions of homeless people, in fact millions of homeless families, young children too. So it's the influence of modern society that creates that. So the answer to your question is, how do you respect those people? It's not just a matter that they're trying to be young. They don't know their place anymore either, okay? And I'll just finish this with two sentences. I went to Ukraine 5 years ago, and I was doing my teaching over there. And that was a wonderful experience for me because they gave me respect for being older and experienced in our religion. And it was a very, it was an amazing experience for me because I didn't experience that in America, I didn't experience that in Europe. And I saw what a difference it made for my life to be able to be given that respect. So, how do we fix that? I think it's kind of like the same way that we're trying to fix this economic thing. That we have to understand what's broken, stop doing that, understand what needs to be done, and act with consciousness to do what should be done. That's the best answer I can give. You're welcome to stay for the rest. Yes? So.
I think for many years now, our culture has not been a culture of wisdom. It's been a culture of accumulation and things, and that has valued things like what you're talking about. So unfortunately, the people who are old now have grown up in a culture which hasn't been a culture of wisdom. So they haven't put any importance on acquiring wisdom, and ultimately have nothing to share when they are...
Good answer. Yeah.
Another thing is that some of the values, equality, we say any opinion is basically has the same value as any other opinion. Why should we ask around with that? I can make an opinion of my own. We encourage that with the young people. I did some serious work on this because I had a young son who was really he didn't want to go to school, and he had really big problems, and I realized that our whole culture about how me and my wife was arguing with each other because we both had the same idea that my opinion must be at least as good as yours. And we demonstrated that for the children, and we
became victims of it.
And the idea that, for instance, that I had to realize that if I wanted his respect, I sometimes had to speak differently and say that if I want him to respect me, I have to be sure that I'm telling the truth and just not just an opinion. And to start having this is completely unmodern. And we built together a new culture in half a year, and we changed the dynamics of the family completely. But it took some work to figure out what were for instance, also that we both were rebels. We were, me and my wife, we were very anti-authoritarian. We said, well, this obedient son is actually just copying us. He's actually an obedient son who's actually doing what we're showing. So we had to say that if we want to be able to tell him to first go to school, and second, stop smoking all kinds of different weeds, and all this kinds of thing, we would have to say, well, as long as we demonstrate that we don't obey anybody, we can't expect him to obey anybody.
Very good.
And it was very complicated to figure out how creating this sort of role game and create new roles that we succeeded and it worked very, but I have been
You
trying
should
to.
give some courses about that.
You should write a book about it, yeah.
7 years ago, I
We're
closed.
holding a break now.
Okay.
So we're gonna coordinate with the others.
Okay.
Is that for lunch?
Yeah.
Is that
One last comment.
No, it's 3-4 minutes. I think we should.
Okay. So we'll begin with that when we come back. Right, thank you.